Start off sketching from your reference photo. Just sketch a little tiny bit of this cupcake. You don't have to have it perfect. We're going to work loose and have some fun with this. In my palette above, I mixed Quinacridone Red, Pyrrole Red, and I used Aurelian Yellow. Laid that down first, and that's because I wanted to capture a little bit of light inside of this cupcake. And then I used a little bit of my sap green with a little bit of Aurelian Yellow, and I sketched out those lines that are going to be on the cupcake, basically to preserve those. And I can use a tiny bit of horizon blue on the edges, and that will create a little bit of shading on the outside. I'm only dabbing in a little bit. Don't fuss, don't do too much. Just have some fun with this. I'm working wet on wet for this next section. I added a little bit of water by where the cupcakes were, and then I let it dry for a second, just enough to let some of that water and the sheen on the paper. Whenever I wet paper down, first it's nice and shiny, then if you put a light on it, watch it as it dries and look at how the color changes. So I am just adding in some of my basic colors and adding in a tiny bit of shading as well. I let my paper dry really well, and then I took a chiseled brush which has a nice angle on it. I dipped it in water, and then I dipped it on my paper. And what did that do? It lifted off paint. This is called lifting. It is a fun thing to try. It's one of the techniques that you want to be able to do. And my Arches paper, my Holbein paints, I use paints that are transparent, which means they will lift up. There are colors that are opaque. They're not going to lift up at all. I mean, you really have to scrub to get those things off. So try lifting off. It's a great technique to use. I'm using a little bit of Hooker's Green, a little bit of Ultramarine Deep, plus some neutral. And I'm just getting the painting really dark on that left-hand side. And the reason why is I need to create depth. I need this ornament to look like it's towards me. And if I create the background darker, you're gonna think that there's this nice dark background, and out coming towards you is this ornament. So great basics on painting with depth and with light. And right now I'm glazing. I'm adding another layer of color in to this cupcake ornament, and I'm using my Quin Red again, and I'm using a little bit of a alizarin crimson right there for these edges. I'm just going to play with my colors, and I'm going to look at my reference to find the highlights and find the dark, and I'm going to just continue to add that in. But look how beautiful that red looks when you add layer upon layer. Don't be afraid to try different things, and this is one way of how I did that. And I'm using a tad a touch, just a tad bit of neutral mixed with my red to create this deep, almost like a black, but it's actually a red color. And I'm using that to create shadows and to build like a three-dimensional look to this ornament. Right now, I'm using a chisel brush. That's a brush that's got a longer amount of hairs, and this is thin, and I'm adding needles in. This is where I think I can go a little haywire and add a ton of details that are not necessary. That's just me, and I just have to sometimes tone it down. For this painting, it was fun. I was relaxing, and sometimes that's enough of a reason for you to paint. Let me mention one paint color that you've got to have in your palette, Quinacridone Gold. This is a yellow that when you use a little bit, it looks like a nice deep yellow, almost like an orangey type of yellow. But then when you build, meaning you put another layer down, another layer down, another layer down, it has the most incredible orange colors. And that's one of the paint colors I used in this top. I would also use permanent yellow orange, deep. That's a great color to have in for a gold. You can use a tiny bit, I would say, of scarlet red. And Quinacridone Scarlet has got a nice orangey color to it. So whenever I'm creating gold, I'm mixing these different types of colors right in there. And so it's not one color, but it's got a few. Now all I'm doing right now is finishing up by adding in these pine needles. And I'm using, again, my chisel brush, which is very thin and small amount of hairs, but they're longer. It's a lot easier to draw lines. And that's how I'm going to finish this up today. I so appreciate all of my subscribers, those who are supporting me through Patreon or YouTube memberships. You are invaluable, and I would not be able to do what I'm doing without you. I hope that you have a wonderful Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you next time.